Hey everyone, is the Xbox Elite Wireless Controller Series 2 really worth it? So I've seen a few different videos on here, and I think there's some things that aren't quite covered. I'm going to try and explain them here. The big thing is in the system, and that's what I want to really focus on. But I'm going to talk about some of the differences. First up, price. Standard controller, $54.99. Elite Wireless Controller Series 2, $144.99. It's 3 times the price. That is a massive difference. So what are the differences we're getting here? Why is this so expensive, and really should you buy it? I think it depends on your play style and what you want from your controller, but don't worry, we're going to cover them all. So let's talk about the physical differences of the Elite controller versus the standard controller. The first big difference is it's a little bit heavier. Not a huge amount heavier, but a little bit. So it does feel nice in your hands. It's also got these rubberized grips around it, which are very nice to hold. And they're a little more grippy than the standard controller. I know the Series X controller improved things a little bit by adding a bit of a kind of tactile feel to the plastic, but they are, at the end of the day, still plastic. But this rubberized grip round, it does feel nice. The bumpers and the triggers are similar noise level to the standard controller. If anything, the bumpers on the Elite controller are slightly noisier, so they are still quite clunky. But some other cool things about this is you have 4 buttons on the underneath that can either replicate the 4 buttons on the front, and that means that your thumb can stay on the right stick all of the time, as opposed to have to go off to hit the X, the Y, the B and the A. Or you can use those buttons underneath for additional controls whilst you're playing a more complicated game where you want more access to other parts of the controls in the game. The left and the right stick can be removed. Simply pull them off. They're kind of held in place with a magnet, and there are different control sticks that are available inside the case. So you've got one that's a taller stick, one with a rounded top, and then a couple that have the kind of sort of more grippy tops on them. The D-pad can be changed from the 360 looking D-pad to a standard D-pad, kind of like old school, where you've just got up, down, left, right, as opposed to like a complete circular D-pad. Charging wise, it's got a built-in battery that you can either charge by plugging the controller directly in with a big long USB lead, or you can dock it in the carry case that it comes with, and then just plug the lead into the back of that case. On the back of the controller, you have individual switches for each of the 2 triggers, and you can control how far they have to travel until they actually press. So you have long, medium and short pull for those triggers. Another cool thing is you can adjust the resistance of both the left and the right stick. Simply pop the top off and use this special tool to tighten or loosen the resistance. Clockwise will tighten it, anti-clockwise will loosen it. This is the profile switch. This enables you to flick between 3 different profiles that you've set up on the Xbox. So you could have one, for example, that's good for first-person shooters, another one that's good for driving, and another one that's maybe just your default, or whatever you prefer. I'll show you how to set these up shortly. So let's talk about profiles, because this is where this really shines. So let's jump out of here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit the Xbox button, the big light up button, and I'm currently on a standard controller. So let's jump into here and go to accessories. So here is a standard wireless controller. So I'm going to go into the configure area of this and just show you what you can do with this one. So you have one profile that you can have active at any one time. You can make other profiles. You can see I've got 2 different ones here, but if I want to flick between them, I need to come into here and override this one to go into here. So I can do that. I can say chuck that in slot 1, and now I'm using this new profile. Now this one is just switched my right stick and left stick around, and also inverted things. So how do I know that? Let me just show you. What you can do is you can go into the configure here and then jump in, and there's certain things that you can change about here. So you can see I've got invert the left stick and y-axis, and I've also swapped the sticks around. I've also turned off vibration, and I can also go in and map any button to be any other button. However, there is an exception: the right trigger and the left trigger you can't do anything with. So, but if I go in here, I can change things like any of these buttons to be any other one. So I could say the A button I want to swap with the B button, for example, just to confuse the heck out of me. I've got to do that. And if I break any of this, I can restore it to default. So if I want to do that, which I'm going to do here, I'll restore, and that's back to the controller as standard. So that is now the same as test 2, so the test 2 hasn't got anything there. So we're on the standard controller. So what I'm going to do is just disconnect this controller, so turn this one off, and I'm going to turn on my Elite controller. Whoops. So my Elite controller is now on. You can see that one's disappeared. Now look at this. This gets way more complicated, and this is where this really, really shines. So let me jump into this and explain what we've got. The first thing is you have 3 different profiles that you can have on the actual controller itself. So you can see I've just set something up just to test. This isn't a proper usage of these profiles, but I'm just giving the principle behind it. You might have profile 3 left as default. So you can see the buttons underneath are set to replicate the buttons on the right hand side. And you think, well, why would I want to do that? The reason why people like that is it means that you can keep your right thumb on the right stick all of the time and use your fingers instead. So this means left stick and right stick are always used for your thumbs, but you can use your fingers underneath the controller to replicate those buttons if you so like. I find that still a little bit confusing for me. I need to get used to it, but it is a sort of play style that I could see could have some benefits. Never taking your thumb off of that right stick and keeping that purely for camera rotation. It could speed things up, so that is pretty cool. However, it doesn't stop there. Let's have a little look at this. So the FPS one here, or actually let's just create a new profile. So new profile, and let's say I want to create something that's called for FPS. I know I have one there already, so I'm going to call this one FPS2. Now stick with me here because this now gets rather special. So what we have now is a much more detailed and capable area of mapping. So you can see now we can map the left trigger and the right trigger to be different buttons if we want. We have that versatility which we didn't have with the standard controller, and you can map every single other control on here to be different things, including these ones underneath. So we have the B, the Y, the X and the A, but I can go to any of these and I can do clever stuff. I could, for example, set this to be a shift button, and if I set it as a shift button, what that then means is I can go to any other button and say, if I just press it as standard, I want it to be Y, but what I want to do is when it's shift, I want it to do something else. So you could say that I want it to do, let's see what would make sense. None of that. Let's see, have we got anything here? Maybe a search or something like that. So I could just say, do that for me. And what that's basically saying is as I hold that shift button down the bottom left, I can now search if I hit Y. So it's giving me more sort of button options, possibly more confusion, but you can see the point of this is quite cool. So it's pretty cool that you can assign anything there, but it gets more special than just this. Okay, so let's just restore that to default just so we don't get too confused. Check this out. Left stick, you have full sort of control over the sensitivity of the stick. So this is set to be the standard sensitivity curve, and when you're sitting in this area here, if you use the D-pad and go down, you've got this sensitivity curve which is currently set to default, but if we press A, there's all these different ones, so you can have it aggressive if you want. So if you want this to be moving real fast, you can do that there, and you can even adjust the curve adjustment, so how this sort of interpolates, so you can have it more or less aggressive depending on what suits you, and you can also change the calculation. So this gets really geeky. My point here is you can make these more sensitive, move faster, to suit your exact play style. So you've got a lot of control over this. The same thing goes with the right stick. So I'm hitting the right button to go over to the right stick, and we've got the same thing here. So you may want your camera movement to be super fast. So we could say we want this, we want this aggressive. So we want this to move real quick, just however you want it to go. So that's pretty cool. Now here's where things get rather special. So you remember I said that the triggers underneath the controller, there's a switch that enables you to go from a long pull to a short pull depending on where you set that sort of control on the back. But the other cool thing is I can adjust the sensitivity of this button. So if I want this to be normal range of motion, I think I've got my thing set to short actually. Let me set it to long. So you can see there I've got much more control because I've got this big long pull of the trigger now, and it's showing me how that is interpolated and I can change kind of the range of that here if I want. So I can say, I want this to be a tighter, I want that to be the hot zone, which is pretty cool. So I might say I want a little bit of play where I don't want it to do anything, and then I want it to be in the middle. Or maybe I want to say, I want that hair trigger to be ridiculous. I want it to be boom. And then, so I'm using the D-pad to go down here. So I might say, by the time it gets there, I want it to go. I don't want to wait till it's up here. So that's saying where it's basically going to active. So I could just set this to nothing, so I could have literally a hair trigger. As soon as it gets to there, boom, gone. That is pretty cool. So, and then tighten up the trigger, and that's instant. As soon as I press that button, it's gone. You can also do the same with the left. Have that on different settings if you want, or you could mirror the triggers. So if I mirror the triggers, then when I go back into these, I've got to do them again now. But you can see both triggers will be treated the same. You can also have that control, but have one trigger set with a larger range of motion if you wish, using that sort of switch on the back of the controller, or keep them both the same. That's entirely up to you, but that is pretty cool. You've then got the vibration, which is a lot more advanced than the standard controller. So there are, vibrations in the triggers for any game that supports it, and also the right and left main parts of the controller. And you've got full control over how aggressive or how gentle these are. So you can change these to be however you wish, and they'll be a lot gentler or a lot more aggressive depending on what you set them to. So that's entirely up to you how you want those to go. So you've got that. And lastly, you can even change the brightness of the logo on the controller. So you can change that to whatever you want. And again, we go down with the D-pad and change that to whatever, and everything is good. But I'm hoping what that shows you is actually when you start looking in depth, you can see why this controller is so much more money, because you've got so much more versatility to it, and how it all works. Now, bear in mind, we've spent a lot of time configuring this one. Let's go back. And remember, you've got these. So you can do that for 3 different profiles, or as many different profiles as you want, and then just have them here. So as you change game, you don't need to come back in here and change the profile. So if I'm playing, a FPS one moment, and then I change out and I want to play a car game, I just press that middle button, the one below the logo, and then I'm on profile 2, and that's good for my car. Or if I'm playing a game that's neither of those, I move to profile 3, and then my buttons are back to the default one, so I know what I'm doing. And I think that's brilliant. I think that's a very, very clever bit of kit. So yes, it's 3 times as much as a standard controller, but when you start looking at the build quality and the amount of versatility this controller brings, I do think it is very, very good. The one thing it doesn't give you is anything like a quieter setup than the standard controller, but hey, you can't have everything, and they've got to save something for the next one. There's also not the share button on the screen as standard, on the controller like you have with a new Xbox Series X controller, but you could map one of these many buttons to be that if you wanted, and I would expect they're going to be updating this controller at some point, because they've put it on a slight sale, nothing too crazy, but yeah, it's that. The other thing I will say is that Microsoft did say this thing goes through some serious beating in the sort of build area to make sure that it is robust and more solid than a standard controller. So they did many tests, coming up with something that is pretty special. That's it, my friends. I hope that was useful to you. If it was, give us a thumbs up, please. That's much appreciated. Any comments welcome, and I'll see you again in another video.